Good morning, members. Welcome to the Housing Subcommittee. May I just remind you that this meeting will be recorded and made available for public listening in due course. Move on to item 1. I've Sederunt apologies, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 apologies this morning, one from Councillor Foster and one from Councillor Smith. Councillor Martin here substituting for Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Declarations of interest, members. Yes, Dennis.
Chair, just to say that I'm on the IJB, but I see item 2 is not financial or anything, so I won't be leaving the room. But just to say that as a member of the IJB, I'm just declaring it.
Councillor Mayor, can I remind you there's also dispensations being granted from the Standards Commission for IJB members, so no need to declare.
Clear the same for me, obviously.
Sorry, Chairman, I think I heard Claire saying wasn't through the mic fair enough, but there's no need to declare, I think, because of the exemption. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. However, it's always up for individual members to decide.
Thank you. Just before we move on to item 3, I'm sure you'll have noticed we have Harry Hay sitting up here with me today. Harry, as you know, his position now is Head of Customer Services, and that includes the housing and homelessness section of that. John, who, as you know, is Head of Strategic Housing and Welfare, he is moving on at the end of March. He will be leaving us, so Harry will be taking over, and Harry will be sort of become our lead officer in this particular committee. So he's here today as a sort of transaction between the two, so rather than just coming in later on. And Harry's sitting in with that, and I'm sure he's welcomed by the committee, and look forward to working with him going forward. Also, thanks, I think, at this stage to John for all the hard work that he's put in helping support this committee and in taking the department forward. I think the committee would hopefully would support me on that. Moving on then, please, item 3, Strategic and Housing Investment Plan. Can I ask then, John, have anything further to add to the report?
Thanks, Chair. No, nothing further to add. It's an update report following the November report that considered the full SHIP submission, and it's essentially suggesting some additional items and some changes to Lawburn's programme. The additional projects, particularly in relation to the partnership support for regeneration funded projects, the funding for that was only announced in September, so it was kind of too early out of the blocks for consideration at November's committee. So the details of those bids are included. Happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I'll open it up to members. Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. Good report. Good to see this come in front of us. Good to see the private sector being encouraged via the government as well. I think the only question I had on it in regards to the 40% and 33% grant, then where do these actual sites lie? Do they lie in just one of the sections or both sections, John? That was the only thing that was outstanding for me.
Thanks, Chair. All 3 projects are out with these SIMD indices areas, so they will qualify for the lower rate of 33%. In Dumfries and Galloway, the only kind of 3 locations, I think, where there's SIMD status is Lockside, up in Hitsdale, Stranraer and Annan. I think there's 4. None of these projects are contained in those sites, so it's the 33% grant rate that will be available to the developer.
John?
Just a quick one. As I say, I was actually a member of the public. Whereabouts is the site in Annan Road?
Thanks, Chair. It's the old R&D depot by Crosspipes down at the bottom towards the railway station. So it's an existing development site with detailed planning consent, and this developer's purchased it off the previous owner with full consent in place. And obviously that's all being discussed with the appropriate planning officers as well, so it's all in order.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. One answer I'll not get today, but just for my information, the handy van service that's referred to works in... Next thing is, oh well, I better leave that to you then. I have skipped my papers. I must be in a hurry to get home. Sorry, Chair.
See, if it had been at the pre-meet, you would have found that out. Dennis?
Yeah, Chair, just, is there a financial ceiling to this? I mean, for, not for each development, but for total development, is there a sort of million and a half, 2 million, is there a financial ceiling?
John?
Thanks, Chair. The Scottish Government have produced very detailed guidance. This is the guidance booklet that goes with it. They're expecting the majority of the bids to be below £500,000, and the scrutiny monitoring increases as the potential bids increase. But the detail of it is set out there. There's no absolute ceiling, but as the bids become larger, the requirements and the monitoring arrangements become that more detailed, and it's all set out in the Scottish Government guidance.
Jeff?
Yeah, my question was about funding as well. What's the total value of the PSR, and is it allocated on a regional basis, or is there any sort of limitation in that, or can developers come back in and bid for it?
Thanks, Chair. I think the national pot is something around £15 million, but it's been allocated. It's been assessed and allocated centrally, so it's not allocated through the existing regional framework where the normal affordable housing supply programme funds are allocated. It's all being dealt with centrally, so you could get a significant number of bids from a particular area, and there'd be no kind of geographical spreading about of the cash. It's a challenge fund, and it depends on which developers are going to come forward with proposals.
Finlay, please.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. Firstly, probably a simple one to answer. The Academy Street development in Castle Douglas, what's the background to that? And the second question was, how do private developers get involved in this scheme? Is it something that the council would identify as SHIP projects and look to engage with a private developer, or does it work from the private developer applying to become part of the SHIP and so on? Just an idea of how that whole process works.
Thanks, Chair. In relation to the first question, the Academy Street project in Castle Douglas, Lawburn couldn't agree acquisition costs for the site. They were miles apart from the owner, several £100,000 difference in the valuation, and there was no way that they could bridge that gap, so they decided to withdraw that. And obviously they've put in an alternative proposal from Moffat. In terms of the partnership support for regeneration, it is developer-led. So obviously the nature of the thing is that developers either have got existing properties that have kind of been mothballed and they want to bring forward, or they see opportunities that they'd be prepared to get engaged with. So it's really private developer-led, but there needs that local authority strategic overview to make sure that the government are not invested in funds that don't align with our strategic priorities. So that's how it's worked in this case as well. The private developer initially kicked off the discussions legitimately directly with the Scottish Government, and then we were brought into those discussions just before Christmas.
Thank you. Jim McClung?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's regarding the PSR and the 40% grant funding for SIMD. At what level of the SIMD? Is it 5, 10, 15 or 20? And also on the Lawburn housing sites, how many and what type were proposed in the Academy Street? And I take it from the ones that they want to replace it by, it's not 20 amenity and supported, it's 20 amenity oblique supported. And in phase 2, it's amenity oblique general needs, i.e. it's a total of 20, no 20 plus 20, and then 20 plus 20 in the second phase. And if there's a difference between what was proposed in the Academy Street site and the ones that they want to replace, what effect does that have on the possible grant level of money that's available for the SHIP? I.e. are they going to be asking for more of a grant than what they were for the Academy Street site?
Okay, thanks, Chair. It's 15%, the SIMD figure is 15%. In relation to the projects that will bring them forward. It's not a like-for-like swap. I think, I've not got the detail in front of me, but I think from memory it was maybe a 12-unit scheme in Castle Douglas, and it is a 40-unit scheme in Moffat. So there would be a larger commitment overall in terms of the ship, but there is capacity within the allocation that the council have got. So it's not presenting a funding pressure for the council in terms of its ship delivery, and we see it as a key project, certainly that will link to health and social care integration. So it's 2 phases of 20 units each.
Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. I would like to, first of all, echo Ian Crothers' sentiments. I think it's first rate to see, in fact, a particular fund, scheme, call it what you will, being slanted towards private developers to offer housing for sale in difficult markets. I think, we need to be using all possible avenues to meet the current housing demand, which I think we all agree, Chair, is likely to burgeon in the years ahead. Going back to the point that Finlay raised, if I understood John correctly, he's saying, in fact, that the onus essentially is on the developer, to beat a path to the door of the Scottish Government, as it were, if that's one way of putting it. Can I ask, Chair, without sort of infringing in commercial confidentiality, is John aware of any such approaches from the western part of the region? And I'm thinking with particular reference to Stranraer, where there is a tradition of certain developers over the years who have provided quality, made use of various schemes, Chair, and provided quality accommodation, which has been much appreciated and well used. And I wonder, as I say, good luck to the Building Craftsmen Dumfries Limited with their proposals. Totally supportive of these, but I wonder if is there anything similar being contemplated, as it were, for the western part in general, but perhaps, given the history, Stranraer in particular, as I say, without destroying commercial confidentiality at this stage, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify my earlier comments in terms of the role of the local authority in relation to the proposal and the private developer, I wouldn't describe it as being the onus is on the private developer. It's just the nature of the sector. It needs to have that commitment from the private developer in order to take the scheme forward. I'm certainly not aware of any expressions of interest for applications for this fund from the west of the region, but hopefully through bringing this report to members' attention and getting the wider coverage of the scheme locally, that it might generate some additional interest. And my understanding is that this is not a one-off, this will be an annual pot. So in future years, particularly potentially linked to Stranraer regeneration, there could be opportunities for other developers to come forward with proposals. And obviously we'd always be receptive to that. And the first point of contact the Scottish Government would have would be with the local authority to assess our view on any proposals that are being made by private developers.
Thanks, Chair.
Jim Dempster.
Can I go back to item 3, Chair? Just again, it's maybe a parochial question, but nevertheless, it'll maybe affect other areas in the region. John will remember well the Craig Forth Consultants report, which in some cases was a damning report, and what it said in Upper Nithsdale was in the short and medium term there was no need for additional social housing, although we now have a regeneration plan that it's sort of overtaken that. But how do we get round the Craig Forth Consultants plan in terms of the ship and get areas that are currently deemed by social landlords as no inappropriate area to visit because the Scottish Government wouldn't fund additional social housing? This is a different approach, and I understand that, and it may well be that there will be an opportunity, no matter where you are in the region, to have a proposal included in the ship. But I'm concerned that the Craig Forth Consultants report may well hinder approaches such as this.
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Dempster's shown all of our ages by referring to the Craig Forth report, which was actually produced in 2004. So it's out of date, I think. The Craig Forth report has got no status now. We've had a further update to the housing need and demand assessment in 2009, and we're just about to complete the draft HNDA for the update, which will go out to consultation next month, and that will inform the future local housing strategy and the future SHIP. And we're in a different, completely different environment that we were 10, 11 years ago, where the model of identifying need was based on identifying specific geographical hotspots and taking very specific action in terms of settlements and villages. We're now moved to the model of housing market areas. We've got 6 housing market areas for the whole region. Upper Nithsdale features as part of the wider Dumfries HMA, and that gives the local authority much more flexibility about decisions around investment. So the Craigforth report has no status. We've moved on to a different way of assessing need, and we're updating that model for the next 5 years going forward. And this committee will see the recommendations coming out of that piece of work probably for April or over the summer by the time we've completed it, and we've got feedback from the Scottish Government.
Chair, delighted with that response, and I'm delighted to see the Craigforth Consultants report consigned to the bin. Thank you.
Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. Just on the back of what you said there, I think success does breed success, and I think if through yourself, Chair, and the Council, that you do promote this to the highest way we possibly can. Hopefully the press and the media will pick up on it the best way they can, but obviously some entrepreneurs in Dumfries and Galloway who have been active. Just been going back to the HNDA, and you're saying there's a draft coming up next month. Will that come? I noticed the next Housing Committee is in April, I think. So will that come in front of the Housing Committee, or is that going straight out to the public? How's that working?
Thanks, Chair. The way that all local authorities have been required to put together an updated housing need and demand assessment has changed quite significantly, and the Scottish Government have basically developed a single tool that all local authorities are obliged to use, and a lot of that information is pre-populated, so it's a much more straightforward process. The HNDA will be going out to stakeholder consultation, and then it needs to be assessed by the Centre for Housing Market Analysis, which is a division within the Scottish Government. The results of that will come back to the Housing Subcommittee. We don't know how long that assessment will take. It'll be tight to get it to April. I suggest it's probably more likely that it'll be ready for July's committee. But that's the process, and the structure around undertaking housing need demand assessments has changed significantly even from the last time that we did it. It's pre-populated, it's a standard model. Every local authority or strategic planning authority has to use this model that the Scottish Government produced.
Thanks very much for that update, and keen to be kept in the loop in as far as when it does go out as a housing subcommittee member, that we're can actually look into it, possibly even feed into it if required, but certainly see what the whole thing looks like.
Okay, thank you, members. Just a couple of points I'd like to bring in as well, John. I too welcome this as a scheme aimed at private developers rather than the RSLs. I think it's something that we should encourage, and it should hopefully bring the opportunity across the region to bring some of the, apart from the new build opportunities, but to bring a lot of the brownfield sites back into use through this particular scheme, and private developers' input to that. And I think we should all welcome that, and therefore given greater opportunity to better value rental opportunities as well for the people of this region. Just a couple of points on that, and on that particular scheme as well, though, because as we have to agree the particular proposals coming forward from the developers through the SHIP, are we legally held to a minimum number of units that we can include in any development that we would support through the SHIP programme? And secondly, on that, because this is a government-supported scheme, when it comes to the actual buyer or potential renter of the properties and the end state, would that have any effect or preclude them from tying into some of the other government opportunities, the help to buy, etc., that the government offers for first-time buyers and that as well? With the fact that it's already been supported by the government in one way, would that preclude the end user from accessing some of the other schemes that are out there to support them?
Thanks, Chair. My understanding is that they would need to look at whether or not there's a duplication of funding going in. So if the developer's getting 33% grant funding, the reason for that is to make sure that the eventual sale value is reduced to low-cost home ownership levels. The intention of that is to make it more accessible for first-time buyers, households who are currently on the CHR awaiting affordable housing. I would need to seek advice from the Scottish Government about whether in those circumstances, if it's demonstrated that the for sale price has been subsidised essentially by this fund, whether or not there would be additional subsidy going in. I think that could present a difficulty, but I'd need to check and get back to you on that, Chair.
Just, my point being is the concern for the end user of this particular scheme, because they're obviously not involved, and I appreciate if it's a reduced cost, final sale cost on the property, then they would benefit from it that way. But I know it can be quite complicated. There are a lot of different avenues for first-time buyers and help-to-buy schemes out there, so they might feel at the end of it that slightly aggrieved if they're not eligible for a help-to-buy type scheme that's put forward, and they may see it that the developer is benefiting from that more than them. I appreciate that be a reduced house cost, but that's a point that we need to carefully monitor, I think, moving forward, and make sure that is known when these developments are taken forward. Whether it's something on one of the site notice boards as the development's going forward, I don't know, but I think it's something that we should certainly monitor and look at going forward. And similarly with the particular schemes, because it's not just for new build or for saleable properties, this will work as well for rentable properties, therefore offering a reduced rent to those that are in need. Is that correct?
The initial proposal is to offer them for sale, and if the market is not attracting purchasers coming forward, then the developer has got the ability to negotiate a rental arrangement with the Scottish Government. That's correct.
Alistair?
I think, without wishing to sound patronising in the slightest, Chair, your comments and your questions are very much in point. I wonder, on the back of what you've just said, sir, would it be possible perhaps to give consideration to maybe assembling a wee roadshow, as it were, to get as wide as possible publicity or publicising of this scheme throughout Dumfries and Galloway? It seems to me that there may very well, and again, I'm thinking particularly with reference to the western part of the region, there may very well be people out there, who simply don't know about this. And if we had an appropriate roadshow, for want of a better term, or something similar, Chair, it might stimulate a degree of interest which would benefit, as far as I'm concerned, not only the future recipients of the housing, but the economy of the region as well. So if it's not too resource-consuming, Chair, I would suggest that we should look at the possibility of doing something along these lines. I think it would be well received. For instance, I can speak from my own area with a degree of confidence. It would certainly be well received in the Mid-Galloway context, and it might just be surprising as to the response that you would get. Merely offer it, Chair, as a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that these particular schemes that come forward, we need to get as widely publicised as possible, and therefore get the full use out of the scheme that, to those that meet the criteria, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with that. It may be something that could be tagged on to the back of something else that the council is doing within the area, rather than a separate one, as say resource-wise. But I'm certainly open to that, and unless other members have any other opinions on that. John, could you comment on that?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, certainly happy to take that on board, and we can have those discussions with the relevant Scottish Government officers who've got responsibility for the fund, and try and maximise the promotional activities and see if we can do some kind of joint initiative covering the region with a particular focus on the west, given that it looks like we've got projects coming forward for the east of the region anyway. So certainly happy to take that on board. We'll have those discussions and report back.
Ian?
Chairman, it was maybe covered there, I maybe missed it, but I think it's a good point, roadshow. I think, again, promote it as much as we can, but you asked a question specifically, I think it was on the upper and the lower limits of the size of developments that may well be applicable to this. Did we get an answer to that? If we did, I missed it.
No, thanks, Chair. There are no limits. It's really for the developer to bring forward specific proposals, and they will be assessed on the merits. But there's no floor or ceiling attached to that.
Finlay?
Thanks, Chair. Just on the back of what Alistair said, I know I certainly looked into some of these first-time buyer schemes that I think there's 3 at the moment. I wonder whether some of them weren't specific to Dumfries and Galloway, or didn't apply to Dumfries and Galloway. It might be useful to get a briefing note just on exactly what the impact would be or the benefits would be for first-time buyers through the various schemes. But certainly, my belief or my understanding is that the properties that are built with funding through this, there's certain price limits because it's a lot of it's to do with first-time buyers. So maybe a briefing note on how it applies to Dumfries and Galloway would be useful.
Do you, between Harry
Certainly
and John,
take that
do you
on
arrange
board,
that?
Chair.
Yes,
Thanks.
send that, circulate that to members of this committee.
Will do.
Okay. Thank you. Return to the recommendations, please, members. Members are asked to agree the changes to the Strategic Housing Investment Plan as set out in paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5 of the report. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, Housing Scotland Scheme of Assistance. John, have you anything to add to the report?
Thanks, Chair. This is the annual update for the scheme of assistance that members consider. The only thing I'd draw members' particular attention to is obviously it's quite a significantly different proposal, certainly in terms of allocation of next year's funding, because the functions relating to care and repair, handy van and food train extra, which this committee has previously funded, are mandatory functions to transfer to the integrated joint board. So you'll see that the budget available for next year has been adjusted to take account of that. And obviously there's proposals in the report relating to use of funding for empty homes, BTS and trusted trader. And myself and Sandra Harkness, the service manager for trading standards, are here to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, John. Sandra, is there anything you want to come in at this point with? Or are you just happy to take questions?
Nothing to add. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Members? Jim?
Thanks, Chair. On the handy van, is there a day or days or a week when they go to different regions? And the reason I ask that is, an old buddy needing a battery put in a smoke alarm, there's no point waiting a fortnight. So I just wonder if we are advertising days, and it's about accessibility to the handy van service. That's what I don't expect an answer today, but if we could get some indication of pattern or frequency or whatever, and where they are in different days, it would help to publicise stuff locally for the folk that might want to take advantage of that. The second question is on the below tolerable standards thing, 311 page 8. It's the last bullet point. It's maybe just the way it's worded, but the second bullet point is to introduce a flat rate grant award of 30%, and to introduction of a discretionary means test for people aged 60 or over in place of a flat rate 50%. That infers that if you're 60 or over, you might well be assessed and no qualify for a flat rate 50%. And that seems to me age discrimination. That's maybe wrong, it's just the way that I'm interpreting it. And the last thing is the trusted trader scheme. Went on the internet and I couldn't find a trusted trader in DG4 or DG3. So is there some reluctance on the part of some traders from some areas to become involved, or have they just never been encouraged or had the opportunity to register? I know it's a free service and I wonder why right across the region they don't do that, unless I'm not working my PC right, it might be that, of course.
Right, Jim, thank you. Certainly with the handy van, I know that we have at least 2 people operating the handy vans in different parts of the regions, but I'm sure John will bring that up. And I think on your second part there, I think it's possibly misleading, and the way it maybe reads is not how it's intended, but I'll let John come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Apologies for the mobile phone going off. Yeah, in terms of the operational arrangements for Handyvan, the Chair's correct. We have two operatives to cover the whole of the region. In terms of the specific operational arrangements, I'll certainly get that detail to you, and if they cover up in Liddesdale at particular times, particular schedules, we'll make sure that that's known. In terms of the clarification of 311 of the report, the final bullet point, introduction of discretionary means test for people over 60, the minimum that they would receive is 50%. And the issue that we needed to deal with is that some over 60-year-olds wouldn't qualify for the 100% passported benefits, but can't afford to get the repairs done even at 50%. So it was actually trying to provide additional support rather than providing less support. So if you read it that way, it's the minimum is 50%, and subject to financial assessment, they could actually get more than that. But they may not. It would be the households who wouldn't automatically qualify for 100% through the passported benefit arrangements. Is that okay? In terms of
That's fine, aye.
In terms of the trusted trader, I'll obviously pass that to Sandra to deal with. Thanks.
In terms of the coverage for trusted trader, we are aware of some cold spots in terms of traders. I've just tried to look it up there and it's still loading for DG3, so I'll take your word for it that there perhaps aren't any. I wasn't aware that there weren't any in DG3 and 4 because they weren't areas that I was aware we were specifically targeting to try and get traders. There were other areas that I know it was a bit slower, but where we think it is slow and there's not coverage, then we are targeting them and trying to get them on board.
That's good, Sandra. If you do find any, let me know, will you, please? Aye.
Okay, thanks. Alistair?
I was about to suggest, Chair, that perhaps it might be helpful to go through it sequentially in the various headings, empty homes, below tolerable standards, etc. But the genie, or perhaps in this instance the Jimmy's well and truly out of the bottle now. But seriously, my comment would relate to the first section, empty homes programme. Totally supportive of what's being proposed, Chair, but I think we've got to face up to the fact that if this represents the carrot side of the equation, I think we've got to revisit and look again at what I would take to be the stick side of the equation, because, you know, what's happening here is that it's not just empty properties, it's empty, mouldering, semi-derelict, ruinous properties in certain circumstances, and they are a blight on our communities in Dumfries and Galloway. And as far as I'm concerned, you probably say the same about the wider country as a whole, Chair, but, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, we've spent too long dancing around this. And I think we've really got to take a grip, as it were, in appropriate circumstances and really force people to address the dereliction that they are inflicting on communities. In fact, I can remember having discussions with John and Jim O'Neill, and there was a report brought to this committee a number of months ago to amend our policy, and it was predicated on a couple of properties in small villages in the mid-Galloway area, and the committee, to be fair to them, amended their policy, but at the end of the day, the owners of the properties decided that they wouldn't do anything about it, despite, in fact, having been given the opportunity, a beneficial opportunity. The result is that these properties are still sitting there, they're still blights in their communities, and we, as Planning and Building Control Authority, or Strategic Housing Authority for that matter of it, Chair, we let this continue. And as far as I'm concerned, it's simply not acceptable. And, you know, my view is that it's exercising communities to an ever-increasing extent. And I think we've got to recognise that as an authority. And as I say, one side of the equation, by all means, let's develop the carrot side of it. But by the same token, if it's not getting results, we've got to take a much stronger approach in forcing people to deal with dereliction, which regrettably is all too prevalent in a lot of our communities. So I'd be grateful, Chair, to hear, with your leave, John's response or whoever's response to that suggestion.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. I know that through the introduction of the 100% council tax on second homes, again, was a way to try and encourage, shall we say, property owners. But I appreciate as well that doesn't always work, because not all derelict homes are second homes as well. So that wouldn't help in that situation. But John, be interested in your comments.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think strategically the council has taken the approach of both a carrot and a stick, and certainly the funding that's proposed in this report is to provide that carrot to positively engage with owners. In terms of the council's ability to undertake enforcement action, there's a range of legislation. There's notices that can be served under the Housing Scotland Act. There's notices that could be served under building standard regulations, and in some circumstances through planning regulations also. What I can say is that certainly the work that we do, we work very closely with planning and building standards colleagues to see what combined action we can take in relation to some householders. Some of them are very, very difficult to crack, and ultimately the costs of that work could fall to the local authority to do if the owners fail to comply with the notices that are served. So it's not a straight line to say you tell the owners what needs to be done, you serve the notices and you get them to do it. There is potentially a cost ultimately the local authority has to pick up. But we have served notices and we continue to do so where it's appropriate. And with the appointment of the empty homes officer, I think this carrot and stick approach will need to be accelerated and more activity taken in relation to enforcement, as well as providing the grant assistance that's available. But you're also right to draw attention to the fact that the council decided to use its discretionary powers to increase the council tax on long-term empty properties and basically double the charge. And I think that will have certainly effect on some owners who would then be encouraged because of the financial penalty to do something about those empty properties. So there's a number of ways that we can tackle it, and it's about making sure that the council deals with all of those issues, provides the encouragement, provides the advice, provides the grants, but ultimately is prepared to take what enforcement action is necessary for some of these communities, because in some circumstances they are it's blighting the communities where you've got some dereliction, and it's one of the things that we're trying to tackle. But it's not an easy answer, and it's not short term, but it's something that I think we've demonstrated we're trying to take more seriously in a more coherent way.
Yes, Alistair.
Yeah, that's a good answer, Chair, and it's a comprehensive answer, but let me put it to you this way. If, as an authority, we do our homework, for want of a better term, and you know just exactly, for instance, when to serve Section 179 notices and on which property to serve them, you will not, by and large, be left with egg in your face and having to put your hand in your pocket and pick up the cost. I'm not suggesting for one moment we'll go gung-ho, but we have a track record in Wigtonshire of having served these in a handful of cases, and it's worked, at the end of the day. And what I'm really saying, Chair, is I think in occasions we're simply too shy of looking at that possibility. And as I've said, I think there's a locus and there's a role for it in appropriate circumstances. We certainly recognise it, and it was as far back as the days of the old Wigton Area Regulatory Committee, but I don't think it's necessarily, well, put it this way, I'm trying not to be critical of council officials, Chair, but, if you suggest the serving of Section 179 notices in certain quarters, those concerned border on freaking. Now, that's not a reasonable response either. I think in appropriate circumstances, Chair, it's a legitimate route down which to go, rather than being faced with a total, we don't want to know. And I'm not talking about strategic housing staff. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Alistair. I suppose some other issues that's thrown up by that as well is the fact that not all derelict properties are empty. Some of them are lived in at this particular time, and not all derelict properties are private owned. There are publicly owned derelict properties out there as well. And that's as well as a particular way that we need to encourage those properties to be brought into use where we can. Come back, Alistair.
I'm grateful to you for your leave, sir, to allow me back, but I think the last point in particular you made is very, very valid. I have continually stated that before we, as a housing authority, or a planning or a building control authority, adopt a hard line with private proprietors, we should put our own house in order, and I can take you to various properties in Wigtonshire where, regrettably, Chair, they fail that particular test. So your comments certainly resonate as far as I'm concerned.
Same subject, Chair. Unfortunately, genie's out the bottle. I'm not going to mention Sankerall Primary School, but there isn't another building in Sankerall. Public's concerned about it, bulging walls, sinking roof, and it's next to a public footpath, creating huge concern. I wasn't going to mention it, but I couldn't help myself. There is two things, though. We've never ever got to the bottom of this derelict building strategy that we're going to develop months and years ago, and it doesn't sit with this committee, it sits with EEI. But we should be sending a message back to our parent committee saying this has to be dealt with because there's a major issue in the whole of Dumfries and Galloway. The other thing is, I'm absolutely certain we should be invoking compulsory purchase in some cases and taking property from these individuals. I've got a situation where a man from Hong Kong just bought a derelict property. He has absolutely no intention of doing away with it. I don't know what the issue will be. And the problem for us is, because it's a business, we can't apparently double the rates. There is no financial penalty to impose on that particular individual. He claims they bought it to protect its heritage. It's a disaster in the middle of Sanker High Street, and it's just no right. It's absolutely wrong. And we need to grasp this tiger by the tail and at least address some of the issues that can be, and not just allow the thing to just float on, because that's been happening for years. It's just about as bad as the same length of time for the Craig Forth Consultants report.
Okay, point taken. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of points. It's a good down the recommendation. The first point was in regards to the IGB and how the transfer of delegation, I think it is, and it refers to this, to the scheme of assistance. I'd just like to go to the finer detail of that, because my understanding was that the IGB would have the overarching strategic look at that, but the finer detail and what we would normally take care of, we still revert back to the council. So just if we could get that clarified, maybe that's being discussed at IGB as well, and as far as governance and how that proceeds. It might be clear, there's a lot of things clear, I think, within the Act, but at the same time, the council still adheres and administers a lot of the stuff, and so does the NHS board for that matter. But I would imagine the IGB, the board, will end up with committee after committee after committee in order to get things done. You see, I'd like further clarification in regards to that. Trusted Trader Scheme, I was reading through that, I was really impressed, and I have got some local constituents that are members of it, and they've received benefits from that. And I look at some of the statistics in regards to that. It says for each pound spent by the council in providing this scheme, the business have identified a £10 of new work. This is a conservative figure and is only based on feedback received, and therefore does not count work that has not been received part of the feedback, because I think only feedback part of their workload or the jobs that they get through that. It ticks three of our main priorities with the council as well. And it really is a good scheme. And when I looked at it, I thought, well, we're only really supporting this. I think it's for the next year. So get clarity on that, because it's something I think if this is moving away to the IGB and such like, I think it's a scheme that's worth supporting over a 2-year period, if that was possible. And I would certainly be supportive of that because of the benefits that come from it. So just clarity in regards to the IGB and the governance issues there, how it applies, and if it is any possible route in regards to funding this possibly for a couple of years. I don't know if there is, but I'll be certainly willing to do that because of the benefits we receive from it as a council and as the local economy as well.
Okay, as far as the IGB is concerned, it was agreed that lock, stock and barrel, everything related to health and social care was transferred across to that, including the funding to go with that. And it has been mentioned at this committee as well that we will have no legislation over or even monitoring powers over that anymore. That falls down to the IGB. And once they're established and settled, it will go to the full joint board. But governance-wise, I'll see if Claire can help with that side of it. On your second part of that, the trusted trader, it's not my belief that the trusted trader scheme is going across. That is staying with the housing subcommittee, and that will be financed and monitored by us. But that is my belief, and I'm quite sure I'm correct on that. But if not, I will be. I will gladly listen. Claire, can you come in on that?
All right, I'll do my best not to further make things more cloudy or muddy. My understanding, rules of IGB and council. The IGB is owns the strategic plan, has strategic oversight, looks after, responsible for the budgets, for all of that, and then will ask partners, including like the council, to deliver what it wants in its plan. So the council will have some operational accountability in getting some of this to happen, but I can't really say any more than that. There's obviously discussions to happen in our own review of schemes, sub and what our committees are looking at, and the IGB itself will be looking at its own scheme and how it manages and monitors its own performance, but those discussions and decisions haven't happened yet.
I think, Ian, as well, on top of that, from my understanding, the discussions that have been had with the IJB, etc., especially on the scheme of assistance, is that they can see by our reports and our monitoring reports over the years that we've had a successful relationship with Lorburn in taking this scheme forward and carrying it out. And when you see by the customer and the client reviews that we have in the papers, 100%, 89% satisfaction with them. And I don't believe that the IGB are looking to change that. I think they're looking to possibly move forward with Lorburn on that. But that's not for me to say. That's for their decision. But it has, as we know, it's worked very well. It's been very successful, and we've helped a lot of vulnerable people in the small adaptations that we do in that respect. And I would expect that the IJB would take that on board in moving forward with the particular scheme.
Totally, I would echo everything what you've said, and that's why I bring the point up in particular. It was probably more around about, we have a particular role when it comes to grants over a certain allocation. And the Housing Committee would normally sit down and agree them, and I think that's through the scheme of assistance, unless I'm wrong with that. But that's the point I was probably picking up more than anything. I would imagine the operational side of everything else, it's just where the actual Housing Subcommittee has a clear role to play.
I appreciate what you're saying there about the sort of level of funding on the higher schemes that come in, but we have no right over that anymore. The whole thing transfers to the IJB. So we have no further say in any particular schemes coming forward that would require extensions and the higher cost adaptations. That has all gone to the IJB. Jim, you were up for a different point to what you came in on before?
It was just the IJB thing. Ian's a member of the IJB, so he'll have strategic oversight anyway, but there has to be a clear distinction between the funding that goes to the IJB and the funding that remains here. And the only complication, if it is a complication, and it will happen in social work right across the board, is that members of staff will remain employees of the council, but they will operate on behalf of the IJB on the instruction and the financial management of the IJB. Complicated as it might be, that's the position we're in. And Ian's in a fortunate position. He's one of the 5 members in the IJB, and he'll be able to have oversight of what the IJB are doing.
Okay, I have Jeff, then Jim McClung, and then Finlay.
Just on the empty homes, well, 2 issues. On the empty homes programme on the radio this morning on the South of Scotland coverage, it said that Shelter's launching a similar sounding initiative in order to bring derelict properties back into use. Presumably we are working together with Shelter in developing that. And the other one is on the Trusted Trader scheme, when we agreed the initial funding, I queried whether sort of domestic cleaners would also be included on this, because obviously with elderly people, what you're doing if you employ someone as a cleaner is you're giving them carte blanche to range through your house in an unsupervised condition. I was told that we were looking to possibly extend the scheme to areas such as that. Has that happened? Or if it hasn't happened, will it happen?
John?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I can pick up the Shelter Scotland question. Yeah, I heard the coverage on Radio Scotland this morning. That's not a new scheme. The Empty Homes Partnership that Shelter Scotland run has been in place for some time, and it's basically a national advice line. It's a free phone facility, and quite often their response is to refer those owners to the local authority for detailed advice. So there's no duplication, and they certainly won't be offering the kind of services that we'll be providing through our Empty Homes officer and through our Empty Homes initiative. There's no grants, there's no on-site inspection, there's certainly no enforcement action. It's literally just an advice line, and quite often it's a signpost and back to the local authority who can provide that detailed advice. So I think he did say it was a new scheme that was being launched. I think it was launched early part of last year. It's been around for some time. We do work closely with them, and the manager of that scheme also worked with us through our shared services project that finished towards the end of last year. So Kristen Hubbard was the manager that we dealt with directly. So we have got good relationships there, and we'll continue to use Shelter Scotland, but they're complementary. It's not a duplication. Okay, and in terms of the trusted trader, again, maybe pass to Sandra.
Thank you. We did take on board Councillor Lever's comments last year about domestic cleaners, and we actually have a category now within the home improvement section for categories of traders. We have one for domestic cleaners, and we currently have 5 registered there. However, I appreciate that's not very many at the moment. We also have commercial cleaners in there as well, but we are looking to expand further because we know that there is an appetite from other agencies along the smaller value and more personal aspects of trading. So we are looking, we're speaking with social work just now, and we're looking to have perhaps an extension and an expansion of this scheme into the personal carer type of work, and that will include domestic cleaning as well. So we are definitely looking at that.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to take a leaf at Alistair's book and carrot and stick here to get back to derelict properties. I totally agree with everything everybody says about derelict properties and being a blight on the look of the place. However, as John knows, I'm dealing with when we have a derelict property that is a house that is attached to another house that is causing severe problems for the owner of the house next door. The derelict property is that bad that building standards are actually saying, well, we don't think it's safe to go in there to have a look at the building. It's that bad under health and safety. So maybe that's one where it should be the shortest period of time of negotiating with the owner, and it's not a second home, so we're not getting it's a slightly strange situation, but maybe that's one of the ones that we should be using the stick way quicker than we use with other ones. That was my stick. The carrot here is regarding the trusted traders. In general terms, I noticed that there's 20 applications were rejected and 1 was removed. In general terms, an explanation of why, but the carrot is, it's actually good to see that in 8 months, it's totally exceeded what we expected it was going to achieve in 2 years. It just shows that these kind of things actually do work.
Yeah, I think on your first point, where we have the situation where one property is causing issue to a neighbouring property like that by being attached to it, then yes, certainly we need to sort of progress those type of issues as expediently as we can, and I'm sure John will take that on.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to reassure Councillor McClung, we've been in contact anyway, and that is a particularly difficult case. We are currently in discussions directly with legal services to look at what options are available, bearing in mind the particular vulnerabilities of the owner as well, without giving any confidences away. So it's a complex one, but it's something that we are looking to resolve. It needs to be resolved. It's a clear example where it's completely blight in that area, Stranraer. We need to get it sorted.
Sandra, can you come in on the rejected applications with, obviously without confidentiality side of it?
Well, as Councillor McClung's probably aware, we do work to strict criteria and a code of practice for the traders. So the 20 traders who have been refused just basically didn't meet the criteria or didn't provide the information that we required to be satisfied that they did meet the criteria. And the trader who was rejected failed to meet the code of conduct that was required of them once they were on the scheme in terms of dealing with a consumer complaint. We did try, because we don't want traders to come off the scheme. We want to work with them to improve them so that they do meet the criteria. But on this one occasion, unfortunately, we couldn't get the trader to conform in that way that we could say that they were trusted, and we were confident that consumers could trust them as well, so they were removed.
Thank you. Finlay?
Thanks, Chair. Talking about the carrot and stick again, it's about a year, I think, since we looked at the increase in the second homes or the council tax. And at that time, we had concerns that some people might be caught in a trap where they were trying to improve properties or whatever, it was difficult to sell. And there might have been an issue where there was lots of appeals come through. Is there any plans to bring forward a report just to look at how that has been implemented, how many appeals we've actually had, and whether the carrot and the stick is having any effect? You know, what Alistair was saying, that we need to use both. It would be interesting to see what effect actually the increase in the second homes council tax has had, and whether we're getting the sort of appeals or the numbers that we thought we might have, and what circumstances people are, how often the council's discretion is brought into play, and those really just to get a report on where we are and what effect it's actually having.
Yeah. Okay. John, can you?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That function actually sits with Policy and Resources Committee rather than Housing Subcommittee because it's related to income and revenues and council tax policy. And a report went to P&R Committee, I think in September of last year, that provided members with that annual review. So you'll be able to go online to see that report. Broadly speaking, we didn't get anywhere near the number of appeals that we were kind of anticipating. The policy that was set, I think, strikes the right balance between providing exemptions and support for those owners who are genuinely trying to deal with the properties and those who aren't. But the report went to P&R Committee, and I think that will be subject to annual review through that committee as well.
Jim?
Aye, just two things, and again, the genie, I don't want another genie to come out the bottle here, but I'd be interested to know whether or no we could apply double tax on the property I referred to. It's Wighamson and Sankard because it's a former hotel, so clearly there's an occupancy condition on it. And I'll leave that for you to think about and come back to me, John. The point I was going to raise was, some of you remember Westie's Hame, the house outside the Lidl's in Dumfries. We were taxed, we were abused in the media, but what we did was we resolved a serious issue, both the welfare of the lady and we resolved the issue of derelict buildings. So there are times when this council takes action in a positive way, and we should be approaching this in a positive way, however that positive way comes about.
Okay, members, just a couple of points that I'd like to bring in. Regarding the empty homes officer recruitment process that we have, could you update the committee on where we are with that, John? Because obviously as soon as we get that officer in place, and we can help move on with a lot of these issues regarding empty and derelict properties. And moving forward to the trusted trader scheme, I think it has proved to far exceed our expectations by the figures that we have here, and I certainly think it is a very good scheme that the council has introduced to give confidence in that to the end user, so that the people that are using are trusted. And the cost-benefit ratio that we're getting from that, I think, is really good value for money, and I personally think it is worth endorsing for at least another year. But if we could just have on the empty homes, John, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The closing date for the post was the 8th of January. We're currently shortlisting those candidates. We had a significant response, and we're looking to undertake the interviews middle of February. So they should certainly, hopefully, be in post for the new financial year. Just one other point. I had asked for some other stats on the trusted trade and that from Sandra, and she's produced this for me, which is quite an interesting document. It gives you more detailed facts and figures on the scheme. So if members would like that sent out to you, I'm sure Sandra would oblige and get that sent through to members of this committee. That's if you require that. Okay, thank you. No further questions from members. Can we move to the recommendations? 2.1, note the performance of the care and repair service for 15-16 as detailed as paragraphs 3 to 3.4 of the report.
2.2, note that it's mandatory under the Scottish Government regulations to transfer responsibility for the care and repair, small repairs and home support services to the new Integration Joint Board, and any future decisions in relating to the delivery of these services will be a matter for the IJB as detailed at 3.2. 2.3, agree to allocate £30,000 to support the sustained development of the Trusted Trader Scheme during 16-17 as detailed 3.12 to 3.16 of the report. 2.4, agree to allocate £400,000 to support the delivery of the below tolerable standard elements of the 16-17 scheme of assistance as detailed in 3.10 to 11 of the report. And 2.5, agree to establish an empty homes fund of £100,000 as detailed in paragraphs 3.6 to 3.9 of this report. Thank you. I have no further business, members. Thank you for your attendance today.